So we just finished soft edge duotone. And we just made a mixed version where some things are sharp, like you see on the sword, you see on the hands, and other things, like the fabrics, most notably, are softened. And I think that's working pretty well. And we decide how much. Okay, now we get to special effects. So if we look at our assignment and my little lemon handout, now we get into the dotted line area where this is just kind of showing off. As if you really want your work to stand out. Full spectrum is when you go into your coloring and you add colors that are different than your local color. The local color of a lemon is yellow, right? But if you really want it to look fully dimensional with color theory, you're going to use purple in the shadows because that's the complement of yellow. Full spectrum color in professional examples can look really wild. Like even though Batman is in gray, you have purple and pink mixed into it here. Because that's how light works. You know, different colors will affect the things that they are coloring. And you have kind of warm to cool transitions through all of these duotone colors. Look at all the colors on this rock. You have green, you have orange, you have pink, you have purple, you have yellow. So full spectrum color uses multiple hues of color. Multiple frequencies of color, all within one local space. So how can I do that? Well, I'm not going to use my mixed duotone layer because it's got a lot of gaps in it, right? What I'm going to use is my combined duotone, or actually I'm going to use my soft edge. You can use either one. They will work. I'm going to do mine with my soft edge. Duplicate it. And then turn off the soft edge, right? So that my mixed hard edges come through. Now on this duplicate, I'm going to call this full spectrum. And what I got to do is do some complementary colors that can mix with the colors I've already chosen. So full spectrum, I'm going to mark with a color, and I'm going to mark it with blue. Now, how can I do full spectrum in a really efficient way? I'm going to double click it and open up layer styles. So instead of painting in different colors, which I could do, I could layer in oranges on the blues, I could layer in reds on the greens, but instead I'm going to go to my layer styles and I'm going to pick gradient overlay. And because the gradient I already had selected is kind of this rainbow gradient, look what that does to my colors. It goes from being very rational to now having lots of colors mixing into them in different places. This is full spectrum color. Now I can control that gradient. Maybe I don't want it to be so extreme because that's pretty extreme. So why don't I just go to my basics for my gradients? And I don't love just light to dark. So let me go to my oranges. And what I want is one that's kind of a mix of warm and cool. So let's see, let's pick this one. And I'm going to move this slider to the middle. And I'm going to add a new color to it. We're making a custom gradient. You will need to know what your gradient tools are. And I'm going to have it shift from warm to cool. And you can add different colors on it. And you can shift their positions. And this is pretty, fine-tuned stuff. But the whole point of full spectrum is that you're mixing colors into things, not just lights and darks. So I'm doing like a slightly coolish white. Okay, those colors are obviously really extreme. But notice what I can do. I can change the angle of them. So I can put the cools near the bottom and the warms at the top. And that makes some sense, right? Like bathed in light from a sunset. And then I can play with the opacity of it. How much do I want to mix it into my existing colors? And I can reverse it. I can make it lighter on the bottom, darker on the top. I can also play with the scale. How broad or how narrow is this spectrum? All right, so let's say I've done that. And now I've mixed all those colors in a range. And you can see the effect it has. Okay. What's nice about doing it as a layer style is it can be turned on or off. But because I did it on my soft-edged, unfortunately, all the hard edges from my mixed are not showing anymore, right? So now what I can do is I can erase away from the full spectrum, or I can play with different blending modes. And those blending modes will not only mix the colors in different ways, but they'll also let my hard edges come through again. So this is one, linear light. It's not exactly what I want, but you can see how effective it is. Pin light is a good option. I often use it. Soft light is often a good option, and I use it. So I'm actually going to try pin light. And you can try all of the blending modes that can give you some interesting results. But on pin light now, where I don't like the colors, I could just erase, subtly erase away. But I can also go up to my adjustments and play with the hue saturation and shift the hue to something I do like. And then erase away in places where I think it gets it wrong. Like I don't like what it did to the talons. I want to bring those back and sharpen them up, especially on the hand and on the eye. But I don't hate all of it, right? So I kind of like having some of those purples in the blues. You see it? I don't think I like it so much. Well, maybe I don't know. On the edges here. Okay. So now, what's next? That's full spectrum. That's like having relish on your sandwich, or some slightly strange flavor like banana peppers that complement everything else. And you can decide you're better off without it, but there it is. That's kind of helpful. So again, gives a little bit of life. This is subtle, but it's full spectrum. It's there. Save your work. Next. Color holds. Color holds are special effects that go on top of your line art. So I've used Wonder Woman a lot through this presentation because Wonder Woman has the primary colors, right? So full spectrum Wonder Woman is here. You see yellow, you see pink, you see purple, all in her skin. But one thing you also see in these is you see color that goes on top of the black line art. Where do you see that? Well, in this one, it's subtle, but her lasso is a golden lasso. And so you'll notice, though on earlier illustrations and examples of coloring with Wonder Woman, like here, You see how the lasso has a black outline around it? To really make it look like a golden lasso, it makes sense to replace that, as they did here, that black outline with an orange color. That's called a color hold. Here we have a massive color hold to show that the sun is reflecting off of her wristbands, right? You have this bright kind of star highlight going over the top of all the line art. This is like putting a toothpick with an olive in it on the top of your sandwich. Like extra fancy special effects. So let's get to color holds and why you might use them. So here is an illustration, just duotone, hard edge illustration of Wonder Woman. But the lasso is not inked in black line. That black line was replaced not only with a color, which is orange, but with a glow effect. So that what used to be black line art now is glowing and affects the black lines around it, like in her hand. So this is when you use color holds. Good for special effects, highlights, sparkles, flames. Here we have flat color Wonder Woman with black line art. Here we have a soft edge duotone Wonder Woman with black line art. Here we have soft edged full spectrum Wonder Woman, very subtle full spectrum, but notice that the highlight on her shoulder there is a purple, and the highlight on her shoulder everywhere else is kind of these yellows, right? So we get a little bit of full spectrum there. Also in her cheeks, they add red to her cheeks. So that's full spectrum color. But the most daunting change here, you also see the purple in the full spectrum on her thigh there or in her knee, is that her lasso has been replaced with a color hold. And that color holds have been added to the black shape of her hair, which until this step was just a black shape in the line art. So you have highlights. Everything that goes on top of your black line art is a color hold. Sometimes you use the color hold just to replace the black with a different color. Here it replaces the black line art in selected places with a gradient, and that's a really nice effect. Here it inverts the black line art, so it's the opposite. Here it just fills it all with purple. Here it lets it bleed over the line art. So this is what's called a color hold. If I take my full spectrum lemon, and I just want it to look a little bit more fully three-dimensional while still being digital coloring, I replace the black line art with green, and then I put a little highlight on top of it that makes it look extra shiny. So let's apply that to our project. All right, color hold. If I want to do a full replacement color hold, couldn't be easier. I take my black line art, my black bread at the very top, and now this is going to be stuff above that. So I'm going to duplicate it, which unlocks it, and then I'm going to double click on it to open up layer styles, and then I'm going to do a color overlay. Replace all the black line art with a color of my choice. Now this will just be one color, right? Maybe it's that. And that will give a different feel to my illustration, especially on different color backgrounds. One advantage of doing a replacement color hold is that now I can see my line art on black and on gray and on white. Whereas before, when I had black line art, it would disappear when I had a black background. But it can always be turned on and off. It's just a layer style. What if I don't want the color overlay? What if I want to replace the line art with a gradient instead? And what if I want to use a pretty wild gradient? Let's see, maybe something like this. So whenever you click on a gradient, it will open up all the gradient presets. They're all folders just like brushes. And then all of those can be modified.